negro y todos me señalaron. Dijeron igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Siempre. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hasta dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi misión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Rise up. What it do? What's going on? Uprisers, glad to have y'all here with us. You're tuned into the Rise Up Morning Show on Black Power Media Reloaded. And I'm here with my co-host, Rakeem Shabazz.
How are you today, Natasha?
I'm doing good. That's been my response, for the last couple weeks. And it's true. It's nice when you can say you're doing good, and that's the truth.
Absolutely. And peace to everybody tuning in. We are in some trying times, obviously, and just do whatever you can to stay focused, stay in good spirits, like my comrade Natasha here, and we all gonna make it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think and I think like one of the things that I think was like a conversation that people were having a lot before Trump got inaugurated or whatever, was like, oh my gosh, like everyone, like be super afraid, be super, worried and panicked and anxiety ridden. And some people were like, okay, well, don't do that. Don't give into that kind of feeling that they want you to have of being scared and stuck and frozen in fear, and just in worry mode only.
Right.
Some people were like, okay, well, wait till he gets in there and then see, and then maybe we can panic then. And now obviously like he's in there and a lot of people are panicking. Absolutely. Now. But I would also say that like I feel like what they want us to do is to panic, right? And because we know that like, especially this country, as well as many other Western colonial countries, their main weapon is fear. Is to have you in a constant state of fear. And so that you're super hyper focused on that feeling. And that's the feeling that you operate from. And we know that when you operate from a place of fear and anxiety, that that it affects the choices that you're making in the moment. It affects like your judgment. And so, yes, while things are going on, we should be worried about what is happening, just like with everything else in the world, but we also should be doing it from a place of controlling, ourselves in terms of our emotions, in terms of what they want us to do. They want us to be freaking out. They want us to be all over the place. I've been talking to people, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and she's just like, yeah, they're all everyone in the everyone is freaking out. Like the whole place is just like,
Absolutely. I read something from a sociologist who talked about this very idea of being overwhelmed is the goal that they have for us, which is why it's news story after news story after news story. Um, Trump, I believe they said that, he flooded the block with over like 200 executive orders.
mhm.
There's no way anybody can keep up with all of that, right? And so that whenever you feel overwhelmed, you feel less empowered to do something, right? And so this sociologist kind of made she was just giving everybody a pep talk within the article, but she, at the end of the day, what she was saying was to not be overwhelmed, to focus on 2 or 3 things that you really care about, that you're really passionate about, and get active with that. Because a lot of times our anxiety is from being overwhelmed, sitting still, and not really being as active as we could or should be. And I noticed that whenever you get out there and you be amongst the people, and you be in community with the people, you teach, you learn, you take part in different organizations, that kind of relieves some of that anxiety, because you are putting in the work to see the world that you want to see, right? And so yeah, don't get overwhelmed. um don't feel bad if you are having trouble keeping up with everything that's going on here at the Rise Up Morning Show. We strive to keep you guys informed, so just stay tuned. We can do a lot of the heavy lifting here, but at the same time, find you a few things that you really care about. Learn as much as you can about it, teach it to others, teach it to anybody that'll listen, and that will alleviate some of that anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you were saying, people should look for also organizations that you can join, because I think being part of an organization and being around other people who are doing something and have been doing something to combat what we know has always existed, right?
Hmm.
And that, like, I'm around some elders who, when they were growing up, the stuff that Trump is talking about doing now, like that was their life. They experienced that, and they're
Right.
like, listen, like, I went through it, we went through it, we fought through it, and we made it. We could, like, so don't allow these things that are happening to make you feel like there's nothing you can do, and how could you imagine to be able to fight against this or anything, when we have the examples there, and we have people that we can learn from, and we have organizations that have been doing this work for a long time and are strategic and have ideas. And I think even being around people like that helps you to understand and be able to deal with this in a time. And I feel like, as Black people, especially as African people, we are people who are communal, and
Absolutely.
that helps us in many ways, in terms of our health, in terms of our mental health, in terms of what we're able to do. And so, and we've been pushed so far away from being in community with each other in the ways that we need to. Especially, we know that, like, COVID had a whole big thing to
Hmm.
do with that as well. But now that we're a couple of years removed from it, and people are starting to say, like, okay, let's not do so much stuff online, let's try to get in person and connect. So I think that's another thing that people, should be doing, is connecting in person, connecting with other people and being able to have conversation. All of those things help you to relieve any of those stress and anxiety things that that we're mentioning here. So this is, I guess, a morning pep talk for everyone. So
Absolutely. And not to forget, like, it's a reason we refer to the struggle as the collective struggle, because we're
yeah,
all in it together, and being a part of an organization, being in a community with each other, that's the African thing to do, and that's how we will proceed.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people are, are definitely making moves. And, one of the things, also, before, we move into some of the stories that we're going to have for today, that recently I was thinking about too, was the fact that, like, the more you're able to, like, know the processes of what is happening, the easier then you could hear some stuff and be like, oh, okay, well, is that really possible? Like, okay,
Right.
what are the mechanisms in which, because I think this is preying what's happening right now is preying on people's ignorance of how the government works.
Mhm.
And not even just the average person. I think even some of these representatives, they don't really know how the government works.
I'm not sure the president knows how the government works.
Exactly.
You know
Exactly. Right, exactly. I agree with you 100%. And it's just like, okay, well, I'm gonna do all this stuff to see what y'all, what you're gonna do about it. Because a law doesn't have to be legal, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be right, it doesn't have to be moral. It's just whatever you decide. And once you put those things out there, and we know that's what white people love to do, is say, all right, I'm gonna do this thing and I'm gonna see what you're gonna do about it. Even though I know it's immoral, it's illegal, whatever the case may be, even if they know what they're saying and putting forth is illegal, they're going to put it out there anyway to see if they can get away with it. And so I think that's part of what we're seeing.
I saw today, and I think we're going to obviously see a lot more of this to come. But I saw today it was a news anchor, and he was talking about ICE and what's been going on with the ICE raids, and he was eating a taco, mocking the Hispanic community, the so-called Hispanic community, and he was like, "What are you going to do? Come take it from me?" Right? And this is, again, it goes to your point. They are going to do things that are going to be antagonistic, that are put in your face, like, this is what we're doing. What are you going to do about it? Well, again, as we spoke before, what we're going to do about it is continue to organize. As J. Rue the Damager once said, organization kills more devils than bullets. Like, we are even quoting Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our unity is as powerful as an atomic bomb. I mean, when we think of unity, we're not necessarily thinking of in the sense of us all having the same religion, us all having the same exact ideology, but we are unified for one common cause, and that one common cause is African liberation and the liberation of all oppressed people around the world.
Exactly. And I think that's a great segue to our first Black Power break. So we're gonna break for Black Power real quick and come back with some news stories for y'all.
Cocoa brought money to Ghana or to the Gold Coast as it was then, at a time when the economy was becoming monetized and when commodity production was becoming generalized. Then it created an illusion that the future was with cocoa, that wealth lay if one could get hold of a farm which would produce cocoa. And long after the reality had changed, take today, long after cocoa means anything in terms of a money earner to the Ghanaian or to the Ivory Coast or to the Nigerian people, we find large masses of Africans who are still locked into the cycle of cocoa production. Of course, they're not simply following an illusion. They are locked in because structures have been created that maintain them that way. And they're locked in because classes arose historically within our own society. And segments of those classes, at any rate, still feel that their objective interest is bound up with the type of economy and the type of dependent relationship which might have been the case, or which was the case, when cocoa was the principal crop. And we could, by analogy and independent investigation, make the same case for sugar. But then the time comes when one crop goes. And the capitalist system is capable of selectively substituting another product which will reintegrate different parts of the peripheral world into capitalism. But the choice is a metropolitan choice. And whatever they do at a particular point in time, they are free to undo at a later stage. We do not have the control over the process. This is a warning against the illusions that might be created by things like Nigerian oil and Trinidad and Tobago oil, because it is clearly a situation in which they're at the level of the subjective. It's the same phenomenon that, say, the people of Trinidad and Tobago imagine that oil means wealth, that the extraction of that product is in and of itself the basis of development. That is no different from the illusion that might have been created in the late 19th century when Jamaicans started to export bananas and thought that they were onto a good thing. No different from the illusions created by cocoa and coffee and cotton and sisal and every other product that was determined in its essence, as far as production in the world scale was concerned, determined by capitalism at the center, not chosen by our people as an integral part of an autonomous development, not chosen by our people as part of the development of all of our economic resources. So it is a shortcoming that we have to watch out for. Now, over and above this marginalization in the broad sense because of the changes in technology and the changes in the value of the products which we produce and which we sell to the capitalist world, we also find ourselves the victims of the international economic depression, the international economic crisis, I should say, because it exhibits features which are partially features of a depression and features of a recession. But again, this is something in which we live. And if we think about it enough and we look around ourselves, we need not feel that it is an abstraction. It is something which we are living. From 1974, the capitalist world has been in perhaps the most serious, the most pervasive, the most peculiar of its economic crises. Even the bourgeois economists themselves are looking back and they're saying this thing is far more deep-seated, far more wide-ranging than the so-called Great Depression of the 1930s. And if we were to go even further, we would find that 100 years ago in the 1870s, the period 1878-1879, Europeans used to speak about a Great Depression. The term was used in the 1870s. It was reused in the 1930s to represent points at which the international economy was in severe crisis. And whenever that international economy was in severe crisis, as always, I imagine with any social system, the system had to take stock of itself, and the system had to take new initiatives in order to survive. Well, I'm going to suggest that right now, the international economic system, having been in crisis for these last few years, has been taking stock of itself. That the capitalists who man this system, whose consciousness of the process in which they live is now sharper than ever, are aware of the overall ramifications of the crisis, even where they don't have an immediate answer. And very often, we who live in the peripheral world, we amble along without recognizing what it is doing to us and what is its real significance. Above all, for us, the significance is that the burden of the depression will be passed over to us whenever and wherever possible. That is happening throughout the third world. If you were to make an examination of inflation and identify the specific products that now, with a certain proportion of inflation, and then trace the export of those products, you will see the export of that inflation to third world countries, including some of the vaunted oil-rich states of the Middle East. Those are also ones that import the inflated products and in that sense accept the inflation from the central capitalist countries, which of course is not new, because in previous depressions, central capitalism has also sought to export the depression, to export the penury, to export the pressure created by contradictions internal to the system.
Welcome back. You're watching the Rise Up Morning Show. I'm Black Power Media Reloaded, and I'm here with my co-host, Rakeem Shabazz. I know I'm saying it again, but hey.
Nah, definitely. And you know, everybody, if you haven't already, and if you already have read it, uh, first off, rest in power to the comrade Walter Rodney, one of our greatest intellectuals. But make sure you put How Europe Underdeveloped Africa on your 2025 reading list. It's a seminal work, and it will definitely help you to see how imperialism and capitalism has uh, exploited Africa and the global South, and also how it affects us in the diaspora.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think so much of what he said in that particular video is connected to exactly what we're seeing now, especially when we think about the Congo. And so I want to jump it really quickly into a story, and we can connect, the story, what's happening in the Congo, to what Walter Rodney was saying in that clip. So one of the stories that we have for you today is a story about how Western embassies in the Congo are being attacked by those who are within the Congo, and particularly because they're accusing these Western countries of complicity in the violence that is happening within the Congo. And so, I'll just really quickly go through it. And it's, so it talks about embassies of Western nations have come under attack in the Congolese capital as protesters accuse them of backing the M23 militants currently assaulting DRC. And so police in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, used tear gas on Tuesday to disperse protesters. Attacks on embassies allegedly linked to the conflict in the country's east. And continually, it says that the protesters directed their anger at embassies of nations they accuse of supporting Rwanda's backing of M23 rebels who have taken control of Goma, the eastern provincial capital. It goes on to talk about how it said that the embassies targeted were France, United States, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, as well as Dutch and Belgian ones. And so protesters were setting fires to these embassies, and Dutch and Congolese authorities worked to stabilize the protests, as they said. This is a picture here that you could see. And it goes on to also talk about how the French foreign minister, talked about how that their embassy was also set on fire, but then they were later took it out. And it says one protester expressed frustration, saying all of this is because of Rwanda. What Rwanda is doing is in complicity with France, Belgium, the United States, and others. The people of Congo are tired. How many times should we die? And I thought that was very, that statement was also very telling. And it says, someone else also expressed that we have a right to express our anger, but let's do it peacefully. One of these Congo's communications minister had said as well. But we know, as this one of the protesters said, like, they're tired, like it's Fannie Lou Hamer. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, right. How many of us have to die? And we won't go into the rest of the this part because we as people know, the M23 rebels have recently seized Goma, and that has escalated the violence that is happening in the Congo. So I'll stop sharing here for a second, but I'll let you go and comment on this story.
Sure thing. So this is what the West does, right? They use any trick in the book in order to continue to destabilize nations within Africa, Latin America, in order to extract their resources. And we're seeing that the people, they know exactly who's responsible by just them attacking these different embassies, right? And even with them, pointing the finger at Rwanda and its complicity, this is also one of the playbooks of the West, is to use certain leaders of certain nations to do their bidding for possible reward, and to the detriment of the other, right? And this is why Pan-Africanism is so important, uh, because we have to understand what's at play here. And it's not just our, and you know, when we're, especially when we're looking at these different nations, it's not about how much wealth the leader of that nation can attain. It's about the people and having agency over their own lives, the communities, and nations, right? And so, just the one thing that I do notice though is it doesn't seem to get the airtime in Western media as we probably think it should, right? I feel like when it comes to different things happening in Africa, they just play it off in a way that, oh, that's just Africans being Africans, right? Like, meaning that there's always unrest there, there's always civil war there, there's always this, there's always that, but they never go into what is the root of the problem, right? And the root is always going to trace back to the West. And so I think obviously that's one reason that it's never shown in the manner that we would like, right? But, you know, as an African in America, I stand in total 100% solidarity with my brothers and sisters in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Again, we always have to we have to follow the money. We have to see who's in control of the resources. We have to look at who's getting paid and who's being exploited, and we'll have our answers there, right? And so again, with them attacking the different embassies of the West and the African nations that they feel like are complicit or are complicit with the West, they're telling you right there, they know exactly who's responsible for any type of destabilization in their nation.
Yeah, and we know that like this has been happening for a long time. So we know that within the Congo, you think about Leopold and the plantations, the rubber plantations, and the mass genocide, you know, killing 10 million, probably over more, 10 million Congolese, because of the fact that they wanted this rubber and ivory. And it makes me think about what Walter Rodney was saying, when they have a material that they say this is what is going to help you develop, or, you know, this is the material that represents wealth and that will get you to that wealthy status. And so therefore this material is worth killing for, in particular, in the Congo. And so you go from, you know, Leopold and the Congo and the rubber and the ivory push and the killing of mass people for those minerals and for those resources, more specifically. And then today you have the same thing continuing, but for different resources, right? For different resources that, again, they say are the ones that are going to carry us into this new century. But whatever they say is, you know, the money crop, like he was saying, whatever they say is the thing that is a sign of wealth and a capitalistic accumulation. We are the ones, you know, African people are the ones who have to die for that wealth to be accumulated. Absolutely. And that it's always coming from, you know, within the African continent. And since the 1990s, there's been 6 million people, it's estimated. I'm sure, it's probably a little bit more, over 6 million people that have died in the Congo since the late 1990s. And so that alone, so we know the genocide of 10 million people for ivory and rubber. Now you have, then you go further into this century, and the last century, you have over 6 million people being killed for these minerals, for them to have this quote unquote green revolution. And like Walter Rodney said, we just go along and we say like, okay, yeah, this we have this is gonna lead us into development. We have this is gonna lead us into prosperity. Like while at the same time, that is not exactly it. That we had no choice. It was not selected for us. And as much as when it is selected, they can go along in the long run and say, okay, well, that's not the one that's going to lead you to development and wealth anymore. Actually, it's this material. And all the while, you never have control of it. And so I think, that people having lived through for so many decades through this continuous cycle, is what we're seeing with these attacks that I think are rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about coltan and cobalt and things that are used for cell phones, laptops, EV batteries, and this push for, again, like you stated earlier, of these Western nations moving into the new frontier of technology per se. All of this is powered by Africa, right? When you look at the resources France has, they have things such as, uranium, iron, things of that nature. But the things that they need to give them that push, right, are located in Africa. And this is why they have such a hard time. Well, this is why they're there, right? It's for no other reason, for the extraction of African resources. And so, like, I love seeing what's happening as far as French miners being pushed out of certain parts of formerly French West Africa. And it just needs to continue to happen. Again, we all stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in West and Central Africa and Africa as a whole. And again, follow the money, follow who's attempting to control the resources, what companies, right? We talked about last week about how Apple has been accused of, the exploitation of resources in the area for their, cell phones and laptop devices. And we have to be, I mean, in modern day times, obviously, we have to be, most of us probably need a cell phone in order to live, but you don't have to buy the new one. The new one every year it comes out, because these are the people that it's affecting, right? It's affecting our brothers and sisters in the Congo, and we have to do our best to just be mindful of the companies that we support with our dollars. And again, solidarity 100% with our brothers in Central Africa.
Yeah, and some people are even going back to flip phones.
I see that. Yeah.
Some people are also tired of this whole thing, and there's so much e-waste too. The amount of that's another thing that we don't even talk about, right? So we know that, like Walter Rodney says, a lot of the stuff that are being taken out, we're not the ones where it's being taken out and then it's being sold back to the country as well, right? So that you're not even making, but that you're another market for the same things that you're already having as resources. And so that when we think about that, people who are when we think about that in e-waste in particular, a lot of the waste for electronics, so when people get rid of their cell phones or their laptops or their printers and all this other stuff, a lot of people don't realize a lot of the e-waste goes back. They ship it out of the country, and you have landfills full of e-waste that are very toxic. And so, they're getting these minerals, making them outside, they're making you a market, and then they're going to take all of that trash that they created from your resources and put it back into your country and make it so that, here again, this is another toxic way of killing you.
Absolutely. And it's and not to cut you off, it's what the West does. They see Africa as just a treasure chest for them to take from, right? And since the Berlin Conference, since 1443, when the Portuguese first went to Africa in search of gold, this is what it's been. This is what they have done, and they have to justify this by dehumanizing our people, showing images of the quote unquote African savage, right? In order to justify them being able to continue to take. And this is why we see the images that we see whenever these stories are being discussed on mainstream media. When they are discussed, is because they don't want you to see that these are humans. These are people who occupy a land that has minerals that the West needs, right? And so whatever it takes, right? And so we just always have to continue to educate ourselves on what's happening around the world. And this, again, this is what the Rise Up International Morning Show is about. So we appreciate y'all for letting us go through, you know, a lot of these stories and sharing our commentary, because it's extremely important, and it does affect the diaspora and us in the West.
Yep. And so we're getting ready to bring on one of our guests, and we know that problems like this, like we're talking about like we even talked about in the beginning of the show, the current state of things require us to really have Pan-African solutions locally and globally. And so one of the things that is happening, particularly here in New York, is this call to action that is going to be taking place on February 1st. And so we have a brother here with us, Brother Jasiri from HALA and the Northeast Political Prisoners Coalition, who's here to talk about it. And you see some of the different sponsors of this event as well. So welcome to the stage, Jasiri.
Peace, Brother Jasiri. Peace to the seed.
Family, peace. It's good to be here. Thank y'all for having us. It's my son, Culture. He's joining in too.
No doubt. Peace, Culture.
So, yeah, welcome, Culture. Culture, whenever you want to jump in, feel free. Okay.
Absolutely.
But so tell the people a little bit, Jasiri, about this event that's happening.
Yeah, definitely.
It's happening on the 1st.
You want to tell them? You want to tell them what we doing? What we doing? Okay. So we're having the Never Forget Jordan Nelly People's Forum, right? Very important. This is being organized by the Medgar Evers College Collective, a collaborative of grassroots organizations who believe strengthening our collective power requires solidarity, efforts, and coalition building across multiple organizations. By cultivating political consciousness, by providing tools, skills, and confidence to become a powerful, organized political force towards liberation. The forum is bringing together community members. I know. I'm going to get you the milk. You got to wait for the milk. We're going to get you the milk. Your mama out there. We're going to get you the milk. The forum is to bring together community members in order to have a dialogue about the MTA, the terrorizing and murdering of Black working class communities, and the militarization of the MTA, the further militarization and the terrorizing and murdering of Black working class communities, as well as the funding of billions of dollars that is going to continue the perpetuation of this domestic warfare. So it is very important that, you know, what we're really trying to do is bring community together to have focus groups, right? Because, you know, with some of these forums that people have, you don't really get to hear what community are thinking, what community are feeling. So we want to have the focus groups in order to really have intimate space for people to share, you know, where's their ideology at, where's their at, as we, you know, support folks, you know, understanding, you know, this climate that we're in, right? Using the Black liberation analysis so we can continue to understand, you know, the reason why the harm is happening to African people here in America. And this is the continuation of colonization and the continuation of the violence on our people. So the forum is happening at Medgar Evers College. That's 1650 Bedford Avenue. And it's going to be in room C13 from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. We also have a virtual setting. So if folks can't make it physically, they are able to, you know, hop in through Zoom, where we'll have a facilitator there to also hold the space there for folks' dialogue and conversation. And yeah, so we're asking, you know, community to really come out to continue, you know, this conversation about the violence, the murder that happened to Jordan Nelly, right? Because we, you know, we have a responsibility in addressing this issue. We have a responsibility in getting reparations, getting the justice that we need. And we can't continue to look to other people outside of ourselves to help our problems.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just say a little bit about the Jordan Neely, Jordan Neely, and as well as connected, if you can, to Robert Brooks and Darrell Nichols and what's within the New York, and so all of these things that are happening around the same time.
Yes, as we see, these are lynchings happening to Black people in our community, right? No matter, we got to understand that the social crimes that's happening in our communities because of state violence, right? Because of the historical connections of us, one being taken away from our culture, taken away from our land, right? And then psychologically infused with other ideologies and other traditions that are not ours. So, the social crimes, as I said, the reason why people jumping over the turnstile, we can't pay our rent. We don't have good, adequate food. So, of course, we have to take matters in our own hands to get from A to B, right? So the transportation should be free, right? So just thinking about the issue with Darrell Nichols is the fact of, we shouldn't be having to pay for transportation when we still don't have reparations as a people, right? And so there's going to be more and more incidents and actions like these happen in our community, which happens every day. I jumped the turnstile. You understand? I don't like paying for the fares because I know that I barely have money to buy milk. You understand, to pay rent, right? So we got to understand and the conditions of why these things are, right? Why people are working for jobs that don't even give us a minimum wage to pay rent, high paying rent, right? So this is very important, and connecting it to the Robert Brooks case, like we said, one, prison was not created for us. We was African people taken from our land. We were property, and we are still property. Do you understand? So prison was created for white people to deal with white people, right? And then because of the Emancipation Proclamation, the loopholes and the continue the capturing of our minds and of our people without having to physically put us on the plantation, but to make plantations in our homes, to make plantations in our minds, to make plantations in our communities. And so as I stated that, the social crimes that happen in our communities because we have not been given the reparations that we deserve. It's because we are still fighting for our liberation here. And the violence that happened to Robert Brooks is happening all over the country in all the prisons. It's just not there, right? So that's why we're talking about freeing political prisoners, because they are the folks who, as I said, they are the folks who are freedom fighters who've been captured and terrorized and violently hurt and tortured in these prisons, right? How do we get to max prisons and all that? They created that as a way to separate and isolate us from our families and our community, so we don't even care about people upstate. So we don't even care people in these prisons that are our family members who go to these prisons, right? And then our own families, we feel that shame because we can't even talk about our sisters and our brothers that are in prisons because of the ways that the state have us look at our people in prison. So it's very important why we, talk about all the lynchings and murders that has happened to us and connected to colonization, connected to what has happened to our people historically. We need a historical context when we talk about these things.
Yeah.
You mentioned the historical context and connecting, Jordan Neely and to Robert Brooks and what just happened, and we say these names, and from George Floyd and Breonna Taylor in 2020 and Philando Castile, and why is it important for us to continue to remember our fallen brethren and their names and keep their names alive in our community? What is the importance of that?
Well, definitely, they're always trying to desensitize us, You understand? You know, as a young person, I didn't even care for my own Black life. I didn't have a care for Black life, right? So as our young people and ourselves, you know, we're watching European media that demonizes us, right? And so we watch shows and video games that kill each other and all that. We become desensitized to Black death, right? So we got to see ourselves and our family and our brothers, the people that we are our neighbors to, the brothers that is on our blocks, on our corners. We got to Ubuntu, I am so you are, and we got to really hold that within ourselves much more deeply. And then also is to, you know, one, honor, pour libation, you know, honor our ancestors and our fallen family members and community members, and then also to organize, because this is a continuation. This is not an isolated situation, right? And we must not use as I said, the counterinsurgency tactics to use their language and narratives against our people.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I would also you know, like to point out something that you said in terms of the psychological conditioning of how we look at ourselves as a people, even within our own communities, but also how we, you know, look at those of us who are from our communities but are behind the wall, and really the importance of us closing that gap, right, and unconditioning ourselves from thinking that, okay, yeah, when people are in prison, we should be ashamed to be associated with them. We should be ashamed to say that we, you know, have a brother or a sister or an aunt or uncle or whoever in your family that has had contact with the prison system or that is within the prison system, because that is part of what leads to these issues that happen within the prisons behind closed doors, quote unquote, and we don't know. And people end up being killed, and people end up being neglected, and people end up getting different illnesses and sicknesses and injuries. And so I think like that is very important. And I think it's important I think that's why it's important to have these kind of community conversations that you're talking about and telling people to come to be able to talk about those things and feel like, and help them think about how it's okay to say these things and feel like I'm comfortable to talk about it, even if maybe I might not talk about it in another forum, but at least I know that there are some forums that I can come and I feel comfortable enough to talk about these things and then think about solutions. And I think it's also important, like having these kind of things in terms of knowing what the community needs, really being able to, you know, as organizers, as people who are within the community, as people who want to make changes and really want to help protect and guide and help build where they can and be of service to, is to listen to the people who are in the community, to the other people within your community. There might be things that you think are very important and that need to be done, but there's other people within the community that they might have other things as well, in addition to whatever you're saying, that might need to be done or that might need to be addressed, or things that might be going on that we don't even know about. And so I think that this is great. I did want to ask if you could talk a little bit about, you know, we were talking about in the beginning of the show, how joining organizations and being around Black people and being a community with Black people is a way to help deal with what people are feeling right now. You know, all of the tension and all of the fear and anxiety that people are feeling. Join an organization, be in community with Black people. And I think this is one of the things that relates to what we were talking about. So if you could talk a little bit about some of the organizations that are on this flyer, so that people can know these are some of the organizations that are out there that if they're interested in, they could look more into, they could join if they want to as well.
Yes, exactly. So definitely the Independent Democratic Uhuru movement, they should definitely, you know, get connected with their organization. Specifically here in Brooklyn, they were having a lot of initiatives. Themselves through, you know, learn to grow. So groups of
Oh, you're breaking up, Jesse.
Yeah,
I
you got some.
can hear us.
Yeah, we got some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Hello?
Still breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, maybe if you refresh it, that might help. Like to refresh the page.
Okay.
You know, technology sometimes is always something.
Especially when you start building, you know what I'm saying? Like
Exactly, yeah. You be in the
But-
middle and all of a sudden.
Right. Just kind of piggybacking off what you were speaking on earlier, as far as even while we remember the names of our fallen, I think it's an actualization of us acknowledging our own humanity in a place that has denied us our humanity since we've been here, right? It's not just another statistic or a news clipping. It's a human being that is in community with us, that is a part of our community, that was a mother, father, brother, sister, and so they say, in different West African customs, as long as somebody remembers your name, you're forever alive, right? And so it's our duty to always honor them in that way, to remember them, to speak their names whenever we can, because that's a way that not only we honor them, but we honor ourselves.
Right, absolutely. I agree 100%. Jesse, are you back? Let's see if we can hear him.
Peace, Jasiri. Can you hear us?
I think it's kind of coming. So yeah, so we'll let him, get his video audio together. But again, for the people who are tuning in, make sure you check out this action that is happening, this community forum that's happening on the 1st of February. That's going to be at Medgar Evers College, sponsored by, the Spirit of Mandela organization, the People for Palestine, Hala, as well as Impedum, and I'm sure other organizations will be there as well. So, tell a neighbor to tell a neighbor, even if you're not in New York and you know a friend who lives in New York or some people who live in New York, send them this flyer, let them know what's happening, let them know to come up, show up and talk and about what's happening, what's going on, and any issues that they want to bring up and how we can together create these Pan-African solutions. So we're going to go to a Black Power break. And then we'll come back on the other side with another story. And if Brother Jasiri comes back on, we'll finish off that conversation as well. So once again, you're tuned into the Rise Up Morning Show on Black Power Media.
That is why, of course, this system is not investing in Black education. It no longer needs Black people to maintain its employment structure. You see it bringing in people from outside of the nation to be employed. You see it even is hiring in the world itself, in other nations and other places. Already, it has reached the point where its need for Black males is pretty much saturated. And it literally then is warehousing us in the jails and prisons and provoking us to kill each other and to destroy each other right here in these streets. And yet we are still organizing the education of our children as if the white man still has jobs waiting for them in multitudes. How different our education would be if we sent our children to school to create jobs for themselves. To create their own economic and political systems, to see themselves as the major sources of their employment. As I remarked earlier today while we were in the radio station, I heard something about some people out here protesting for jobs and pushing these other people for jobs. And I asked the question, do we know how many jobs we really create for other people? We are a job creating people.
All right.
We don't realize it because we don't think in terms of nation. You see, if we saw ourselves as a nation, we could see that we create jobs like any other nation.
All right.
I mentioned that today. How many jobs are created by black music?
All right.
Yeah, look at the whole structure of the music industry. From promoters to manufacturers of the records and the tapes and what have you, to the whole entertainment field, to the sellers of music in the stores, you know what we say, the Tower Records and the other great sellers of records and music and so forth, advertising that uses our music and all these things. How many thousands of jobs are we creating as people? We're creating them, but they have them. You see? We sing the music, they sell it. We sing the music, they market it. We sing the music, they promote it. You see? We sing the music, they produce great conglomerates like Sony, CBS Music, creating all kinds of jobs. We're creating tremendous jobs for a lot of people. How many jobs do we create just buying from Koreans? Buying from other ethnic groups out here? How many people are we creating employment for in terms of our spending habits as a people and our consumption habits as a people? How many jobs are we creating going to jail? We're creating all kinds of jobs and wealth. And we must come to understand this. We are creating these jobs, and yet we are begging for jobs. This means that in somewhere our consciousness has been impaired. We're begging for what we are making already. And we cannot use our own creations as a source of our own wealth. I told you earlier today that the Creator could not have intended for us as African people to be a poor people if the Creator implanted in our soils all the wealth that was planted there. We talk about the minerals and the oil and the gold and the this and the that that's implanted in African soil. So it seems as if the Creator blessed us from the very beginning with wealth and possibility. Therefore, for us to be going hungry over this wealth and to be starving in the midst of it and to be perceived as a dependent, indebted people while our wealth is being shipped out to other people, we're actually selling a lot of it for pennies and nickels and dimes and less, means that there is something wrong with our consciousness. Because ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, we've said what? That the wealth of a people is ultimately not in their land. But where is it? It's in the mind. The wealth of man is in his mind, in his consciousness.
That's right. I mean, I couldn't say, have said it better myself. And I think, I was just patting myself on the back, for the for the lineup of Black Power Media breaks that we had, Black Power breaks that we just did, because I think they meld so well together in terms of what we were just talking about, and as well as what we were talking about before. But I'm going to bring Brother Jasiri back on to continue our conversation and connect to what we were just talking about and what Amos Wilson said. So when he's ready, I'll bring him back on stage. But in the meantime, thoughts on that clip?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me of the recent story with Target rolling back its DEI programs, and the people responded and said that they were going to boycott Target from now on. And to see some Black people with products in Target kind of push back on the idea of boycotting Target because their products are in Target, it makes you realize that our relationship to wealth in this country, in this capitalist system, will always be dependent on them and their systems and their institutions if we don't really do for self, right? And so, Brother Jasiri is back. Glad to have you back. Peace to culture.
Thank you.
But yeah, so as far as the people that are interested in and you know coming to the event, but maybe sick and shut in, maybe away, you do have Zoom option, correct?
Yes, we do. We have a Zoom option. If folks go to Mega Evers College Collective on Instagram, they'll be able to find the link there, as well as the People Senate's page on Instagram, or How Our Lives Link All Together's page on Instagram as well. And they also can contact us if need be to get that information as well.
Sure thing.
Great. Anything else you want to say, Jasiri, before I know culture needs his milk before you go get culture his milk.
That's what we were saying. He was like, I'm feeling, and that's going right in my No, definitely. Another thing I want to state that this forum is not an open-ended thing, right? So the Mega Evers College Collective is going to be having training/workshops to build our skills up as community members in organizing, right? So folks could learn how to, do certain tactics and strategies and figure out how to get involved, be a part of certain initiatives that is happening within these organizations. So this is going to be happening the weekends right after the forum. So at the forum, we will also be stating the dates that we'll be having these workshops and who will be doing these trainings. All these trainings will be held by the organizations that are part of the Mega Evers Collaborative Collective. So they will be, doing the teachings and following up with those who want to be a part of those classes.
That's great. Yeah, definitely needed. We know that, you have to train up the next generation. You have to train up your replacements. You have to train up the people that we know. Even when we think about, and like Amos Wilson was saying, right? When you think of ourselves as a nation, then you do different things. Then what you do is different. And so if we think about ourselves as a nation, that we understand, just like any other nation, we need to be having a class of people that we train up to do the work that our freedom fighters did, right? That protect our neighborhoods, provide for our neighborhoods, support those who are within the neighborhoods, build our institutions. So I think this is a great thing that's happening. And I really hope that everyone who can either comes out in person or joins online, and also continues after this forum is over to attend the different projects and workshops that will be going on at Mega Evers.
And definitely, just to one of those points as you mentioned, the one thing that we really need to engage with in the Black movement is personnel development, right? Being to develop our personnel. One of my comrades the other day was like, "Yo, you should be going up for city council," and I was like, "Well, actually, we should put together a training, an initiation for anybody in our community who want to go for city council, because then you go through this initiation and training process and you really are owned by the people. You are of the people because we trained you.
Right.
We developed you of the people." So that's very important, not just saying to go do that, but be trained and developed so you could be of the people and you have the elders and the experts who trained you up that is of the people. So that's very important. And then to the point from Amos Wilson, he was dropping bars. The fact that he said that, us Black people, we making jobs for these colonizers. We're making jobs for these white supremacists, right? Job is how to deal with the African. That's the job. So that's very important and very critical. So I appreciate that, what he said.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing with the people. And we know that there's always something happening in the streets, and that we're connected to the people who will let us know what's happening. And so thank you for being one of the people who's coming in to let us know what's happening. So thanks, Jasiri, for coming on.
Appreciate you, Jasiri.
So that was Jasiri, who was talking about what's happening on February 1st, a community-wide action forum for people to attend at Mega Ever. So make sure you do that. We're going to jump into another story, I think, as well as, and we can continue to make connections with what we saw in the video, because I think, like Jasiri said, Amos Wilson was dropping bars. He's on my list of top 5 dead or alive.
Absolutely.
So another story that we wanted to touch on is this story about France and how Niger, is talking about how France uses Trojan horses to destabilize, for its former colonies. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick with the people so you could see. So basically this story, like I said before, it talks about Niger's Minister of Interior and the Public Security calling for an increased vigilance to deal with the alleged threat that is happening from France. So France, they say, is using underhanded methods to attempt to destabilize Niger. The West African nation's Minister of Interior, Public Security and Territorial Administration, General Mohamed Toumba, alleged. He also claimed that the colonial power was allying with Niger's neighbors to undermine the country, which has been plagued with deadly jihadist insurgencies for years. And this, we can see the connection between other countries that are like France or America or the UK, any one of the colonial powers that we can think of, using neighboring countries to undermine a country, just like when we're, the conversation that we're having about the Congo, how these countries, Rwanda, Uganda, like they're being backed by these Western powers. So it's, the same tactic in a different region. But it's important for us to be able to see those connections so that we can see what's happening and be able to be vigilant. And he says that we must be doubly vigilant to contain the situation, claiming that France uses Trojan horses. And if anybody doesn't know where what the Trojan horse is, think about Rome and I forget the name of the battle where they had this fake horse that they put in front of wherever they were going to fight the war, and it just looked like a fake wooden horse. Like there's nothing here, but inside the horse there were actually armed men who were going, because I think they let the horse in, so they brought the horse in, and then once they brought the
soldiers popped out. Yeah,
exactly, the soldiers popped out. So that's the story. You can look it up for a better story. Google it.
Yeah, I gotta brush up on my Roman on my history of
but
Rome.
It shows how they use Europeans going to continue to use their own tactics, whether it's from ancient times of their own ways, and see how they can revolutionize it for the times of today. And we need to be thinking about our own ways of which we resist these things, the ways that we've done it in the past, and how we can use them for today's times as well. But to continue on with the story, he accused France of aiming to cause instability in the landlocked country and the Sahel region by funding terrorist groups in the neighboring Nigeria and Benin, as well as it continues on to talk about how the former French colonies followed when Niger ousted France, following its allies, Burkina Faso and Mali, as well. And currently, it says that he announced that Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou were preparing to deploy a united force of 5,000 troops to conflict zones in the Sahel region as well. So again, looking at ways that we can fortify these attacks that will be that we know will be coming from European powers, because we know capitalism will do anything, imperialism, colonization will do anything to stay alive. And he criticized former colonial powers for maintaining military foothold in the region under the guise of fighting terrorism, despite their presence being no longer welcome there as well. And then it continues on to say that earlier in the month, President Emmanuel Macron criticized the Sahel states for failing to, quote unquote, thank France for protecting them from the military onslaught. Like, what a joke. He claimed that none of the African nations that France had purportedly assisted during its 2013 military operation would have been able to withstand attacks from extremist groups without their support. But we know from the reports that we've been hearing that once they kicked the French out, things got 100 times better. Not that they were, not that the situations or the issues went away completely, but they saw a dramatic change after kicking out the French. So it's funny that he would say that. And on Saturday, Nigeria's security minister stated that the military cooperation with France ended up creating desolation in the African country. So contrary to what the French president would say. And he said that the forces did not give a security guarantee. These actors allowed themselves everything. They use subterfuges to avoid reacting.
This reminds me of, and we talk about the same old tactics that are used with colonial powers, and just the history of the African independence movement in the 50s and 60s, when you had the Casablanca group with Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Sekou Touré of Guinea, Abdel Nasser, and people that had ideas of a unified Africa, and Africa that controlled its own resources. Well, what does America do? They prop up the Monrovia group, right, and offer them different concessions, and so like we see the same type of things happening to this day. One thing that you mentioned, one of the words in the headline where was that actual the use of a Trojan horse, right? And I think that we have to understand how warfare is evolving. It's very important to study. These are covert methods used by colonial powers, in this case France, to undermine and destabilize a nation that is striving to have agency over itself. As we spoke about before, France and all these other Western nations are powered by the resources in Africa, right? And so that's what this is about. And then so whenever we think about the tactics that they use to undermine African sovereignty, we have to realize that although they use many of the same tactics that they've always used, it evolves through technology, surveillance, how they gather intel, and different things of that nature. The world through the internet is a lot smaller than what it used to be, and so that gives them a lot more opportunity to interfere in the government processes of different nations that they are attempting to colonize. And we've seen this year and last year different high-ranking French officials openly talk about the need to colonize Africa. This is not a secret, you know what I mean? And so again, I just implore you, myself, everybody, to continue to understand how warfare is evolving, the tactics that are used to undermine nations, to undermine a nation's sovereignty, to extract the wealth out of that nation. And again, we're seeing the same old tactics, just in a different way. Let's offer a neighboring nation something with the goal of the continued colonization and extraction of the resources of the other said nation, in this case, Niger. So again, it's just something that we will continue to keep our eye on, something that we will continue to speak about. And I'm glad that they are speaking about it because again, this is what they always do. And they use these same tactics in an evolved way with new technologies in order to destabilize nations and to extract their wealth and power the West.
Absolutely. And I think, to your point of warfare and evolving warfare, and also going back to this idea of the Trojan horse, right? That even if we take this idea of the Trojan horse and we think about it in our own times today, and we think about warfare, and we think about us as a people, as African people worldwide being warred upon, and we think ourselves, if we think of ourselves from a nation standpoint, who are we, what Trojan horses are we allowing in, right? How do
Right.
we allow Trojan horses? How do we actually bring them in to our communities and make it so that we can be attacked from within, right? We can be destabilized from within. So even going back to Amos Wilson, when he's talking about, us creating so many jobs for so many other people, right? We as a nation, we have so much wealth within ourselves, our creativity to create music, to create dances, to create technology, to create inventions, like all of these different things that we do. When we think about even sometimes you see these clips online or pictures online of Black people who, created this or that for these tech companies.
Absolutely.
Right. And so how we're using, our genius to help them create things that are actually going to go against us. Right. And so how do we partake, like what positions do we engage in or do we put ourselves in and don't realize that we're being brought in as part of those hidden things within that Trojan horse, or even allowing certain things to be ideas and things to be coming into our community that are Trojan horses, that will destabilize, that will cause issues and cause harm amongst our own community in ways that we don't realize or think about. And so I think your point to recognizing how war has changed over the years and how it operates against us, and also thinking about like what are the hidden things that we're told to allow into our communities or to do that are really Trojan horses that will backfire on us. So whether it's even when we think about African nations, countries pretending to be friendly to you, pretending like when we think about even what they're talking about, France saying, oh, we're going to come in, we're going to help you, get rid of these jihadists, but actually you're doing the opposite. You're you're coming in as a Trojan horse, period. Or, when they say like, okay, well, even when he was, Amos Wilson was talking about the music. So when we think about even the music, when we look back into the history of how the music industry came to be and came to really profit off of the backs of Black people, whether it's blues or jazz or rock and roll or country or any of those things, they came in as Trojan horses. You because of segregation, you're not allowed to play in this place or that place. Oh, we'll let you play here, or we'll manage you. But at the same time, when we look into the history of Black music, a lot of those pioneers died with nothing. Their families died with nothing. And guess whose families actually got the money, and whose families, future generations still are eating off of that money.
Still.
Are white people. Exactly. And so, but allowing, again, this is a Trojan horse, because if you're really coming to help me, quote unquote, then me or my family should not die with no money. Right. Now, people even today, artists, whether they're musicians, whether they're actresses, whether they're visual artists, should not be struggling, which we hear these people say, talking about this all the time. Like, well, yeah, I'm a Black actress, or I'm a Black musician, or I'm a rapper, I'm this, and really I'm broke, and really, this happened with me. And so again, all of these Trojan horses all over the place that, we need to recognize. But in order for us to recognize those things, you have to be thinking about it from a nation standpoint, and also recognize and think about it from the point that we're being warred upon. This is not just some kind of like hiccup of like, there's some misunderstandings here. No, it's much more than that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to approach the idea of the Trojan horse as an act of war, right? And from a people that are warring upon us for centuries. And they're always going to come, whether it's on like uh, an individual like way, or or on a, or even when dealing with nations, they're going to come as something that's mutually beneficial to both parties, is what they're going to preach. Whether, like we spoke about the record industry, whether it's getting you seen in markets that you may not normally have access to, or whenever we're dealing on a nation level, economic aid or military assistance or developmental projects like roads and things like that, and they'll frame it as if it is going to be mutually beneficial. But you have to ask yourself, when have they ever done anything for the benefit of us? Right? It's that's not a historical thing. And so when you approach it with the context, like you stated, that we're being warred upon, we always have to be wary of these type of things, these Trojan horses, because they come in all forms. They even come in the form of ideologies. I see a lot of ideologies that are extremely destructive to our community at the moment, but they were given to the community as new ideas of liberation, new ideas of freedom, and some of our people run with it, right? But these are the same people that brought us over here in chains, the same people that carved up Africa, that carved up Latin America, the same people that committed all of the atrocities that we've read about for our entire lives. So being able to spot that Trojan horse whenever you study history, and begin to have some political education, it shouldn't be hard to spot, to be honest with you, because if the deal is too good to be true, our grandparents told us that. You know what I'm saying?
Usually
But
it is.
usually it is. But yeah, the main thing that I just have to offer as far as this is the idea that it's always going to come as something mutually beneficial. So I'm not exactly sure exactly what France is saying to those neighboring nations, right? But it's a promise of something.
Mhm.
It's a promise of something, right? And so we
Exactly.
just got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and before we go, we'll get into one last story. Speaking about war, right, and being warred upon, we know that there's
Mhm.
different forms of war, and one of the things that I'm not sure if if everyone is privy to, but that right before he left office, Biden took Cuba off of the terrorist list. But we know, and we knew that once the new administration came in, that they were going to go right back on it. And so
Yeah.
Trump renews economic war on Cuba in his first batch of orders as well. And so basically this story talks about how Donald Trump reinstated Cuba to a list of labeling countries as sponsors of terrorism on Monday. And we're talking about actual sponsors of terrorism, and they're not on this list, right? Because
Right. Right. Right.
and so Trump reversed the last minute decision, as I mentioned before, from the Biden administration when they were creating their executive orders. Cuba's president Miguel Diaz-Canel called out Trump for his arrogance and disregard for the truth, saying that the American president's decision is not surprising, as it is not as well to us. His goal is to continue strengthening the cruel economic war against Cuba for the purpose of domination. The Cuban president said. He also said that extreme economic siege imposed upon Cuba by Trump aims to cause sharp shortages in products and increase the migratory flow from Cuba to the U.S. So again, when we're thinking about immigration and migrants in the ways that they're talking about, the story and the truth about what is happening with immigration and what is leading it and what is causing it and how it's coming, and how it is manifesting is much deeper, as is being pointed out here. This act of mockery and abuse confirms the the discredit of U.S. lists and unilateral mechanisms of coercion of the U.S. government. He added, in the legitimate and noble cause of our people, he said, will prevail and will once again win. So, that's the spirit that we got to have. We're going to win despite it all.
Absolutely. And one thing that this is par for the course when it comes to America and the West and how it views Cuba. Cuba, since the Cuban Revolution and the history of Cuba, harboring political prisoners, Cuba being a socialist nation, the West can never let a socialist nation be seen as a prosperous nation, a nation that is a nation that is doing well, because then it begins, the people begin to ask questions about their own systems, right? And Western nations and capitalist system has to be seen as the zenith of human civilization. And so this is just, again, more economic warfare against Cuba to, like we just talked about with Niger and the Congo, to destabilize Cuba. They want us to view Cuba as a nation that is a nation that is doing poorly because it's in the wrong system, right? Well, you have to ask yourself, what would be the need for economic sanctions then, right? And people have to understand that economic sanctions are acts of war, right?
Exactly.
This is an act of war against Cuba, and it's simply because of Cuba being a socialist nation, the history of the Cuban Revolution, and Cuba's history of harboring political prisoners. I mean, that's it.
Exactly. And I think, it makes me think about Malcolm X's quote: if you're not careful, the newspapers and the media will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And so I think even within this story, when the president of Cuba talks about how this is another way that shows and confirms like the discrediting of U.S. lists, right? These quote unquote lists they have of who's a terrorist, what countries are terrorists, which ones are bad, which ones are not. And this is all just an illusion of their propaganda, making you view Cuba as, some kind of terrible country that is, a terrorist and blah, blah, blah. And therefore, you should love France and,
Right.
go to Paris and what, blah, 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 blah. But you should hate Cuba and, you should see it as a villain and, you should support these sanctions. And so this manipulation of the truth and the facts and and just information in general. So when they talk about fake news and they talk about, not checking, like these lists that America comes up with, make sure, you see these lists, you better do your fact checking because listen, it's not real.
Oh, it's gonna be some bull in it, and
Exactly.
it all goes back to American myth making and the promotion of American exceptionalism, right? We have to see everything else as beneath us. We have to see ourselves as the pinnacle of civilization because we are quote unquote American, and anybody else that does things a little bit differently are the villain. They are the enemy. This was even the justification of slavery. These people are savages that need to be civilized. And so this is America attempting to punish Cuba for rejecting the American civilization efforts, right? And so, and what's so funny, what I need people to really understand, when we have different disasters here, Cuba is always one of the first ones that offer aid, right? And America always turns it down. Even when we had a hard time getting supplies to Katrina, Cuba offered to send supplies. They constantly reject it. And so, yeah, this is just more America bullying the global South and attempting to destabilize whatever they can within the government of Cuba.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that point is really important for people to know, and also to know that like the way, like, you're forget the phrase, like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or
My friend, yeah.
and the friend of my enemy is my enemy, or something like that. I don't know if that's another part, but that could be because
Right.
it makes me think about how, like, Cuba has been a friend of African people. And have, like you said, during Hurricane Katrina, trying to get aid over, how they've provided doctors for and training, military training, medical training for our people from the Caribbean, from Africa, even sending them over their people to those countries. And that because they are aligned with the liberation of oppressed people, African people, they are seen, they must be viewed as terrible, right? And so because they are, you could say a friend of African people, they are automatically, a enemy of America, because Black people, African people, are enemies of America, as much as they don't say it out loud, like they say some of the other stuff out loud. But the way that the actions and the laws and the things that are allowed to happen to African people within the United States and abroad shows that's how you would treat your enemy. Not someone that you think is your friend or is a citizen, at the least. But with that said, thank y'all for tuning in to Black Power Media Reloaded on the, this has been the Rise Up Morning Show. Thank you, Uprisers, for joining us this morning. I hope you have a good rest of your day, but also, remember that little pep talk that we had.
Absolutely. Like always, it's been a pleasure to build with you, comrade. And to the next time, this has been the Rise Up International Morning Show. Peace.
Rise up.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one. Well, the battle is to love yourself and function in society where voices of reason are muted by anxiety, like gaining notoriety is selling your soul. So we tend to go no deeper than the shallow water level, trying to keep us overhead in the face of all the slurs and the stares. Mentally frozen, paralyzed by fear of failure and success. So we lock, stock, barrel, running while it's crumbling. All these towers and they're babbling, but the baby's in the bath and the stash under the bed on my head, spinning from the circles and the puppets and the strings that they pull. Then we move. Reactionary warfare never produces when it's on the field. Feeble and foolish. What tools and what weapons are we using? We need some new ones. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Well, my inner me, really a mirror for the galaxy. New time, brand new paradigms, new contracts to sign. They thought that this would all be televised, though it's happening right before our very eyes. It's on the inside, with their guns cocked. When that rock drops, standing on the rooftop, praying that the mountaintop can live inside the valley. People tell me the reward is somewhere off in heaven, like heaven's only in the sky. A chariot's a swinging, like God is something separate from yourself, from your wealth, from your lover, from your neighbor. Oh, your savior is coming in your own name, coming with the face the same. Real revolution. It's real solutions. Well, we've taken on the ways of the ones who conquer with their guns and religion and division. Got my inner me looking like my enemy. Real revolution. Where my enemy is really a mirror for the galaxy.